Hey, you're home. Welcome home. Did you have a good day today? No? What happened? Oh, it's okay. Don't cry. Everything will be okay. I promise. Let me get that. Everything will be okay. Yeah, some people are just mean. You never know what they're going through, and they take that out on you or anyone else around them. But don't judge them. It's gonna be okay. Don't let their negative emotions bring you down. You're awesome. You're brave. You're determined. You're sweet and kind. And everything will be okay. You want me to read to you? I just started reading The Black Stallion. I was going to read chapter 2 today. Well, come cuddle with me and let's read. Okay? Chin up, Buttercup. I can't see you down like that. Chapter 2, The Storm. The Drake stopped at Alexandria, Benghazi, Tripoli, I'm gonna mess this up, Tunis, and Algiers, past the rock of Gibraltar, entered north up the coast of Portugal. Now they were off Cape Finisterre on the coast of Spain, and in a few days Captain Watson told Alec they would be in England. Alec wondered why the Black was being shipped to England, perhaps for stud, perhaps to race. The slanting shoulders, the deep broad chest, the powerful legs, the knees not too high nor too low, these, his uncle had taught him, were the marks of speed and endurance. That night, Alec made his customary trip to the stall, his pockets bulging with sugar. The night was hot and still. Heavy clouds blackened out the stars. In the distance, long streaks of lightning raced through the sky. The Black had his head out the window. Again, he was looking out to sea. His nostrils quivering more than ever, he turned, whistled as he saw the boy, and then again faced the water. Alec felt elated. It was the first time that the stallion had drawn back into the stall at the sight of him. He moved closer. He put sugar in the palm of his hand and hesitantly held it out to the stallion. The Black turned and once again whistled softer this time. Alex stood his ground. Neither he nor anyone else had been this close to the stallion since he came on board. But he did not care to take the chance of extending his arm any nearer the bared teeth, the curled nostrils. Instead, he placed the sugar on the sill. The Black looked at it, then back at the boy. Slowly he moved over and began to eat the sugar. Alec watched him for a moment, satisfied. Then, as the rain began to fall, he went back to his cabin. He was awakened with amazing suddenness. In the middle of the night, the Drake lurched crazily, and he was thrown onto the floor. Outside, there were loud rolls of thunder, and the streaks of lightning made his cabin as light as day. His first storm at sea. He pulled the light cord. It was dead. Then a flash of lightning began to illuminate the cabin. Whoa. The top of his burrow had been swept clear, and the floor was covered with broken glass. Hurriedly, he put on his pants, shirt, and slippers and started for the door. Then he stopped. Back he went to the bed, fell on his knees, and reached under. He withdrew a life belt and strapped it to him. He hoped that he wouldn't need it. The door opened and he made his way, staggering to the desk. The fury of the storm drove him back into the passageway. He hung onto the stair rail and peered into the black void. He heard the shouts of Captain Watson and the crew faintly above the roar of the winds. Where was I? Sorry. Huge waves swept from one end of the drake to the other. Hysterical passengers crowded into the corridor. Alec was genuinely scared now. Never had he seen a storm like this. For what seemed hours to him, the drake plowed through the wave after wave, trembling, careening on its side, yet somehow managing to stay afloat. The long streaks of lightning never diminished, zigzagging through the sky. Their sharp cracks resounded on the water. From the passageway, Alex saw one of the crew make his way along the deck in his direction. Desperately fighting to hold onto the rail, the drake rolled sideways and a huge wave swept over the boat. When it had passed, the sailor was gone. The boy closed his eyes and prayed. The storm began to subside a little, and Alec felt new hope. Then suddenly a bolt of fire seemed to fall down from the heavens above. Then suddenly a sharp crack and the boat shook. Alec was thrown flat on his face. Stunned, slowly, his face felt hot and sticky. He raised his hand and withdrew it, covered with blood. Then he became conscious of feet stepping on him. The passengers yelling and screaming were climbing, crawling over him. The drake was still its engines dead. Struggling, Alec pushed past himself to his feet. Slowly, he made his way onto the deck. His startled eyes looked into the scene about him. The drake, struck by lightning, seemed almost cut in half. They were sinking. Strange, with what seemed to the end so near, he should feel so cool. They were manning the lifeboats, and Captain Watson was shouting the directions. One boat was being lowered into the water. A huge wave caught its side and turned it over. Its occupants disappeared beneath the water. The second lifeboat was being filled, and Alec waited his turn. But when it came, the boat had reached its quota. "Wait for the next one, lad," Captain Watson said sternly. He put his arm on the boy's shoulder. Alec did his best to smile. As they watched the second lifeboat being lowered, the dark-skinned man appeared and rushed up to the captain. Waving his arms and blabbering hysterically. Under the bed, said Captain Watson. Captain Watson shouted at him. Then Alex saw the man had no life belt. Terror in his eyes, he turned away from Captain towards Alec. Frantically, he rushed at the boy and tried to tear the life belt from his back. Alec struggled, but he was no match for a half-crazed man. Then Captain Watson had his hands on him and threw him against the rail. Alec saw the man's eyes turn to the lifeboat that was being lowered. Before the captain could stop him, he was climbing over the rail. He was going to jump into the boat. Suddenly, the drake lurched. The man lost his balance, screaming, and fell into the water. He never rose to the surface. The dark-skinned man was drowned. Immediately, Alec thought of the black. What was happening to him? Was he still in his stall? Driven by an irresistible impulse, Alec fought his way out of the line and towards the stern of the boat. If the stallion was alive, he was going to set him free and give him the chance to fight for life. The stall was still standing. Alec heard a shrill whistle rise above the storm. He rushed to the door, lifted the heavy bar, and swung it open. For a second, the mighty hooves stopped pounding, and there was silence. Alec backed slowly away, but then he saw the black. His head held high, his nostrils brought out with excitement. Suddenly, he snorted and plunged straight for the rail, and Alec was paralyzed. He could move. One hand on the rail, which was broken at this point, leaving nothing between him and the open water. The black swerved as he came near him, and the boy realized that the stallion was making for the hole. The horse's shoulder grazed him as he swerved, and Alec went flying into space. He felt the water close over his head. When he came up, his first thought was of the ship. Then he heard an explosion. Boom! And he saw the drake settling deep into the water. Frantically, he looked around for a lifeboat, but there was none in sight. Then he saw the black swimming not more than 10 yards away. Something swished by him, a rope, and it was attached to the black's halter, the same rope that they had used to bring the stallion aboard the boat, in which they had never been able to get close enough to the horse to untie. Then he was pulled through the water, out into the open sea. The waves were still large, but with the aid of his life belt, Alec was able to stay on top. He was too far gone now to give much thought to what he had done. He only knew that he had his choice of remaining in the water alone or being pulled by the black. If he was to die, he would rather die with the almighty stallion than alone. He took one last look behind and saw the drake sink into the depths. For hours, Alec battled the waves. He had tied the rope securely around his life belt. He could hardly hold his head up. Suddenly, he felt the rope slacken. The black had stopped swimming. Alec anxiously awaited. Peering into the darkness, he could just make out the head of the stallion. The black's whistle pierced the air. After a few minutes, the rope became taut again. The horse had changed his direction. Another hour passed, then the storm diminished to high rolling swells. The first strikes of dawn appeared on the horizon. The black had stopped 4 times during the night, and each time he had altered his course. Alec wondered whether the stallion's wild instinct was leading him to land. The sun rose and shone down brightly on the boy's head. The salt water he had swallowed during the night made him almost mad with thirst. But then Alec felt that he could hold out no longer. He looked ahead at the struggling, fighting animal in front of him, and new courage came to him. Suddenly he realized that he was going with the waves instead of against them. He shook his head, trying to clear his brain. Yes, they were riding in. They must be approaching land. Eagerly he strained his salt-filled eyes and looked into the distance. And then he saw it. About a quarter of a mile away was a beach. Only an island, but there might be food and water and a chance to survive. They were in the breakers. Faster, faster they approached the white sand. They were in the breakers. The black scream shattered the stillness. He was able to walk. He staggered a little and shook his black head. Then his action shifted marvelously. He went faster through the shallow water. Alex's head whirled with stamina and endurance this horse had. He was being drawn towards the beach with ever-increasing speed. Suddenly he realized he was in danger of his position. He must untie this rope from around his waist, or else he will be dragged to death over the sand. Desperately, his fingers flew to the knot. It was tight. He had made sure of that. Frantically, he worked on it as the shore drew closer and closer. The black was now on the beach. Thunder began to roll from underneath his hooves as he broke out of the water. Hours of the water had swallowed the knot. Alec couldn't untie it. Then he remembered his pocket knife. Could it still be there? His hands darted to his rear pockets. Luckily, he had bundled. Alec's fingers reached inside and came out, grasping a knife. He was now on the beach, being dragged by the stallion, and sand flew into his face. Quickly, he opened the knife and began to cut the rope. His body burned from the sand. His clothes were being torn off of him. His speed was increasing every second. Madly, he sawed away at the rope. With one final thrust, he was through. His outflung hands caressed the sand. As he closed his eyes, his parched lips murmured, "Yes, Uncle Ralph, it did come in handy." Stay tuned for our next video for Chapter 3.